either is fine. Don't really mind either way.
And I'm Kat, and also she, her, they, them, either one.
Growing up, I've always been a fan of horror, so it was a no-brainer to do a horror. I love ghost stories for their romanticism, for the depth of human emotions that you can sort of invoke through them. They're just a wonderful like gateway into reflecting the self and like figuring out what's going on inside. And Kaitlyn and I were just talking about this, but she just got back from a trip from Cape May, which is actually the location that inspired Specter Inspectors and the Cape
Race.
Yeah.
Have not been there since I was very small.
Yeah.
It's like one of my favorite.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, perfect.
I'm from New Jersey.
Went there.
It's one of my favorite places of all time.
Yeah. She took me there when we were first doing this.
Yeah, I took Bowen on a trip with my family there, and it was like the first time that I had actually been staying in Cape May and not a little bit outside of it. And so we were very much inspired by all the Victorian architecture, just the general small town spookiness that was going on. And almost every shop owner had like a story. So we were just like, oh my gosh, this is the best. And I've believed in the paranormal since I was a kid, just because of stuff I experienced as a child. And so ghost stories have always been something that I've gravitated towards. And there's always some element of spookiness in like every story that I've written. So
same here. Yeah. Yeah, yep. You can definitely find panels architecture that I just straight up lifted from photos that I took there. So yeah. I think so. I think specifically as queer people, we're constantly self-reflecting and looking inward. In some ways, ghosts are perfect representations of that. They're like what we leave behind and like our true selves boiled down. And I think that the act of looking for that and like exploring, trying to find that is also very queer. I think that's part of why a lot of queer people are drawn to horror in general. So it just was a natural marriage of the two. And just like as a queer person, I love ghosts and I love stories that are themed around what happens after we leave. What do we leave behind?
Agree with everything Bowen just said, but I also think that a lot of times ghost stories, monster stories, demons, horror, there's a lot of the idea of the other. That's also something as like a queer person, a lot of people experience, and sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. And I think horror also elevates that idea. And especially with Astrid, we really delved into that. And I think that was a big aspect of like getting into her character.
It's a story about only be released if they find out its true name and, you know, and I mean,
Yeah, no. just like what you said, like I hope that people come out of it with either like a better understanding of themselves or like a better acceptance that they don't. Like it's all right to not know everything right now. It's all right to take a breather. You don't have to have all the terminology. You don't have to, have all the answers. But as long as you are looking, and as long as you are enjoying that process and letting yourself be sort of unknown, that's totally fair and good, and you shouldn't feel lost for that, because you're looking, and there's no end game. You're not like reaching a goal. You are just a person, a human being who has nuance, and you might change over that time too. You might be one person one day and another the next, and both of those people are allowed to exist. So I think as a queer person, like even for Kat and I, we started off this book thinking that we were cis, and like, writing Gus was sort of eye-opening to us. We're not as gender conforming as we had originally thought. We hope that other people can sort of reconcile with the fact that they are fully fleshed out human beings, not like 2D.
And just to add on to that, I also think that like that whole process and that like looking inward and figuring yourself out, that also doesn't, it can be like a personal thing as well. It doesn't like a lot of the time in Specter Inspectors, Astrid, when Astrid speaks to her demon, it's very much like, this is me and you, and like this is not like a conversation that's happening outside of us. And I think that that's totally fine as well. Like no matter how you have this conversation, either way, if you're open and proud and out and all that is lovely, but it also can be something very quiet and personal and special, and I think that is equally as important. So
it's yours to define and to find on your own, whichever way, with help or without. Like you can rely on your friends or you can figure it out on your own, but as long as you're working towards it, you're good. I have two answers for this. And one of them is that everything that they wear in the comic are things that I own. So like
oh my gosh, it's great. I love it.
Yeah, they felt very real to me. So I definitely put a little bit of my style into all of them. And, on some days I feel like Ko, where I'm like soft and approachable and cuddly. So he's got like a lot of soft sweaters on. And sometimes I'm Astrid, where it's like skin tight and it's like patterns and clashy and loud. And that's, reflecting when I'm confident, but also like, I don't know, maybe I want to give off a certain energy. And, sometimes I'm Noah, where, I want to be doing something like going to the library or, being productive. So, I try to base them off of that. But in general, I also try to reflect their personal growth with how they wear their clothes. So like Astrid starts off wearing skin tight clothing that's very specific to her character, but she starts to wear, more loose and sort of retreats into herself throughout the comic as she becomes more unsure of who she is. until the ending where she, you know, reconciles with herself and figures stuff out, spoilers, and, you know, comes back to her original style. So I tried to do that a little bit with the clothes, but yeah, that was the general thought behind it.
I also think that when you were mentioning, like, you know, how do they not become stereotype monolith, that kind of thing, I think Bowen also, we have so many queer friends also. So it's kind of like you look at the people around you that you love and you're like, okay, like I kind of get it. And I think that reflects in those characters as well. So
Yeah, queer people aren't just one type of person. They are characters before, you know, anything else. They have personalities, and those personalities, you know, are just as important, if not more so. And, you know, you want to reflect those, because that's, you know, that's who they are. And their queerness does not take away from their style, or, you know, make them less queer because they're wearing, you know, a hoodie or whatever. Right. Well, like, oh, go ahead, Kat.
I was just going to say, I think that in general, when we set out to like create these characters, there wasn't like this one is more important than the other one. They all have a home in this little group and they all have their distinct flavors. But it was important when we were writing the script to have those scenes like in the museum where they get to be on screen with the characters that you wouldn't think maybe they would get along with. But they all have their own way of interacting with each other, and they do have like special relationships. Even Gus and Astrid, who, you know, Gus has their own feelings about Astrid, but through those scenes we kind of get a better idea of the nuance of that relationship, and I think that was very important for us to like include going through the story.
I
Just
love
like,
all of those times when like when Gus has those moments where they're like like I love you and I'm so glad you're okay to like whoever it happens to the couple of times it's the best. I love that.
yeah, I think like just like in real life and stories, you have to ground your characters through the relationships. You know, they are more real people if they have more nuanced connections to different kinds of people. If it was just Astrid and Noah the whole time, they would sort of just be in this bubble that exists in the relationship. But by, you know, expanding them past that, they become more fully realized, so that when they do become a couple, or, you know, when they do connect, it feels more genuine and they are better for it. You know, they don't exist for the relationship. They're more than their relationship. Yeah, I think that it didn't really matter if they were dating beforehand. We hadn't intended it to be, but it really didn't matter if they had been not dating, but like seeing each other and being romantic. They're obviously flirting, and there's obviously something there, connection that's obvious to everyone else too. But the fact that they hadn't like reconciled with that, just like with the name, with identity, the fact that they hadn't come to terms or explored that and just like let it be unknown without being comfortable with that's where the issue lies and the tension lies, is that they didn't really feel comfortable in their gap. The unknown is not something that they were wanting. You know, I don't know how to describe it.
Like I do think that in general, like at least that romantic relationship between Astrid and Noah it like directly coincides with the idea of identity that Astrid like goes through, because that relationship doesn't find that like reconciliation until that identity issue kind of resolves itself, because like there's lots of things that were built around that. Astrid's insecurities, Noah's worries, there were a lot of things that were unknown and kind of up in the air until the plot kind of ties itself up, and then it all kind of makes sense.
Right. And the point was not really, are they dating in the end? It's more just, I'm sure of my care for you, and I know that you care for me, and that's really all that matters right now. That's what was reconciled, you know?
Absolutely.
We just really hope that everyone enjoys Specter Inspectors. We had such a great time working on it. It helped us, get through some tough times with the pandemic and with our own identities. It helped reconcile with those parts of ourselves. So I hope that even it like a tiny bit brings you some joy or, some comfort.
Yeah. And I just hope that when you're reading and you're reading these characters, I hope that feeling of comfort and figuring things out comes through in them. And I hope you can look at them and maybe see a little bit of yourself, because that's definitely how we feel about them.